5:30. The next thing we've got on our agenda is the call order page.
Please stand and join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. Thank you for these people who come in public service to this region. We thank you for the many blessings that you shower upon us every day, for which we are eternally grateful. We thank you for those both at home and abroad who keep us safe and protect us from gatherings such as these. We ask your hand be on those that prepared the food that nourished our bodies today, and we ask for traveling mercies as people depart from this place to other meetings and other ways that they can best do your works in the world. We ask all these things in your Son's name. Amen. Please join me in the pledge of the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Jim. We've got one oath of office that needs to be sworn in. Jim,
I'll take care of that. The Honorable Mayor of the City of Cameron, Nathan Fuchs, would stand. He will be our newest board member. And so if you would raise your right hand, and after I say I, repeat your name, and again, swear or affirm. I,
Nathan Fox,
do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the duties of my office and that of the Executive Committee of the Central Texas Council of Governments, and will, to the best of my ability, defend the individual integrity of local governments of this association. And I furthermore promise to promote the general cooperation between member governments of the region in the interests of the citizens of Texas, so help me God. You may swear or affirm.
I swear.
Welcome. Appreciate you being here. There will be an agenda item for the next individual I'd like to introduce you to. Our bylaws allow for 2 people to be appointed and elected at large from cities below 12,500. And the village of Salado has nominated their mayor, Henry, who is with us today. And his nomination will be before you this month as an action item. So welcome, Mayor Henry. And that leaves us with one other slot. So if there is a city below 12.5 that you would like to make another nomination to, we would gladly accept that nomination. Thank you.
thank you, Jim. The next item on our agenda is public comment. Is there anyone here in person that would like to address the committee this afternoon? Seeing as there are none, is there anyone that's indicated online that would like to address the committee?
No.
Seeing as there are none, we move on to the consent agenda. Item number 5 is our minutes from July 2024 meeting, as well as the expenditure report for July 2024. You may consider consent agenda in its entirety as presented, or you may pull out any of those items and discuss them.
Motion to approve items 1 and 2.
We've got a motion to approve the consent agenda from Mr. Hubnik.
Second.
And a second from Mr. Winquist. Any further discussions on the consent agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. Any abstentions? Ayes have it, motion carries. Moving on to item number 7, which is an action item. This is resolution 024-0001, a resolution authorizing the state Homeland Security Program, Texas Council of Government Planning Grant for FY 2025 funds. We have a copy of that resolution when I pass. I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, in your packet on the second to last page is a proclamation that authorizes us to apply and designates me as the grantee's authorized official to ask the state for our annual planning grant in the amount of $125,988.60. Jesse Hennig is with us. This is the planning grant that has been in place for many, many years. And he can answer any questions you might have, but staff recommend your consideration and approval of action items.
Any questions for Jim or for Jesse? Yes.
I just want to approve.
We have a motion to approve the resolution.
I'll second it.
In a second, any further discussion on item 7? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Any abstentions? Ayes have it, motion carries. Moving on to reports. There's agency on aging, George Losoya.
And we appreciate the leniency of the Carter County Sheriff's Department because I think you made it here in record time.
I want to speak of Carmen, but I did get here in 40 minutes. But thank you, we had a wonderful turnout at Coriel Senior Expo in Gatesville. Got a great chance to meet all the local seniors there and their needs in Gatesville. Got to learn about your new call for seniors there. So a lot of good things happening in Gatesville. So very impressed. So hopefully we can do more support with doing in Gatesville and Coriel County. For me, if you want to go to the next slide, please.
I'm gonna have to ask you all to forward the slides.
I don't have. So just let you know, we had some a renewal of our ADRC contract. This is for the call part of where we connect people with any disability to long-term care services. Also helps support our housing application program and helping people out of nursing homes. So, but that was our contract agreement for $1.2 million. No, not $1.2 million. $120,000. The other thing that we were looking at is our focus for the upcoming year. As I mentioned at our last meeting, funding for we'll have some transitional money for next year. But what we're looking at is besides some career education plan and grant funds, we are all actively received over $20,000 that we have TDC for better transportation, working closely with the HOP. We will start the operationalization on September 3rd when the microtransit is in effect, and then working in our rural areas to enhance the transportation component in the counties that we are serving. We will still need a contract in the areas that will be leading the HOP area. So I will be connecting with the HOP with them on the partnership and grant funds for it. The other thing that we're looking at is really extending ourselves out to the community to be a better partner, working with a lot of nonprofit organizations to kind of coordinate as we move forward. We see that a lot of our budgets would be tightening up. As you're aware, as you're working through your city budgets and the county budgets, the funding can be tight. So that goes for the agencies that are supported by the federal government. ARP has been affected, and I think, to see if our aging population will be supported more than it was pre-COVID. So I'll keep you abreast of those changes, and that's about it. I think I'm not sure because I can't see my presentation. And then these are just all the other events that we're at today. We're at the Lions Club today, and we're at Coriel. We will be at the senior Buck County Senior Expo next month, and then remember we're going to have open enrollment soon. So just giving you all those updates, and I just mentioned about the better transportation update, and then we'll be having a caregiver conference here on November the 6th. So just all the little things. People in your area, let me know if you support in that area to advertise what we're doing in your area to support some activities. Any questions? So much.
Thank you, George. Next, we've got Carmen Milam with housing.
Carmen is fixing a check run issue, so I told her I would give you her route and make the report very brief. There was the client served by county, and the amount last month that was distributed in Section 8 payments. You can see that We have clients in 4 of our 7 counties, and the total distribution was just under $2 million last month. Most recently, if we get this to work, all arrears payments have been made to the Green Housing Authority landlords. We've completed that process. In that process, we moved approximately 435 clients over from KHA to the SICOG program and paid all of the back rents that amounted to about $850,000 to $900,000. HUD provided that funding, so we weren't out any money as a region, and we were able to make those landlords whole. We did agree to enter into an amnesty period for those KHA clients who failed to complete the transfer to SICOG during the required window and time period we had. That impacted about 47 families, and about 27 of those 47 have been responsive to the amnesty period to come back in. And so we believe that they will complete the process, 27 of the 47. The other 20 will remain off program for a variety of reasons. Would be glad to answer any questions you might have about housing. Yes.
Since the transfer, we've seen a drop in landlords, the number of landlords.
Have we seen a drop?
Yeah.
No, we have not actually. I'm happy to say that when you make good on the promise and you show that you can pay the money that people were owed, we've actually had an increase in landlord participation, people that are willing to get back on program that had withdrawn because of concerns over what was happening at KHA. So we're in pretty good shape actually in doing that. Any other questions? I'm going to go ahead and continue on and play the role of Uryan Nelson. Uryan is on some family leave time. I'm not sure whether he wants to be here or doing the tour that he's doing with his visiting family. He wasn't sure. But in any case, if you wanted me to just give you these updates on the slide, the high points are the hazard mitigation plan that covers 4 of our counties is just about 75% complete. Our state emergency radio infrastructure grant has been preliminary approved for $1.75 million in funding, and staff are coordinating with your staffs to complete the processes. There were 5 peace officer training classes held over the last couple of months. There's your 911 call data. We'll talk about 911 a little bit programmatically here in a minute. And the historic trend, staying pretty consistent, climbs a little bit over time. Then you also have the text to 911. So 157 texts predominantly in Bell County. And its trend line. We can get the remote to do it. There it is. GIS, total of 207 new addresses assigned for the month of July. As far as planning, we're in the final sessions of Leadership Central Texas, but thank you to all of you who volunteered to speak to that group. And then we have both a regional transportation group and a SWAC meeting at the end of the month on the 29th. I have a staff member who's filling in for Uryan, who can come talk to us about Safe Streets for All if you have any questions, but basically we've conducted 4 field visits and finalized the project list, which will be presented next month. And our in-kind match is tracking right along so that there should be no out-of-pocket required by those that are participating in the program. So any questions on Safe Streets for All before I move on? They're off light. You can tell Uryan, man, a few words. Susan Thomas is not with us either, so it's a very short month, but we do have Louis LeDoux, who is coming out as our Chief Operating Officer from the Workforce Center. So Louis,
good afternoon, everybody. You'll notice I'm not wearing a suit today for 2 reasons. One, Susan is not here, so I don't have to. 2, it's hot outside. So Susan couldn't be with us today because she is on her way to New Orleans And Jose, as our board chair for workforce, will be joining her tomorrow, I believe. Yeah, so she's got some pre-meetings. We are winning the American Legion National Award for Employment Services. We won the state award last month, and so now we're winning the national award tomorrow and the next day. So it's quite exciting. So I have a short report. You'll see the updated data for unemployment for each county. Bell County's at 5%, Coryell 4.9, Hamilton 3.8, Lampasas 4.1, Milam 4.5, Mills 4.0, and San Saba 4.2. Collectively, that's a 4.9 for our region. Not bad. Next, you'll see the number of UI claims filed by industry. Nothing particularly interesting there to comment on. The next slide. This is by county, the number of UI new claims filed, comparing this year to last year. So you'll see we're looking pretty normal there in terms of the number of new UI claims filed. Next slide, we'll see that during the month of July, we had 6 hiring events. Next month, I'll have many more numbers. We had negative job fair in August, but in July, we had 6 hiring events, serving 346 job seekers for 6 different employers. Next slide, you'll see that during the month of July, we served 10,384 customers, providing 27,643 services. Now, I want to take a moment to brag about this because we continue to outpace the state in terms of the number of people served and the number of services provided statewide. Only Houston outnumbers us, and that's because Houston, well, it's 13 counties and about 6 million people. And their budget is hundreds of millions of dollars greater than ours. So we are doing incredible in terms of the people we're serving and the services that we're providing. In spite of the fact that I've got 15 open positions that are not being filled because we lost $8 million in funding for our National Dislocated Worker Grant. So it's a $4 million a year grant. So for that 2-year period, that's $8 million. So through attrition, we have not been filling positions, but we continue to do more with less. So it's getting a little tough, but we are continuing to find ways to reinvent ourselves and make economies where we can. So our numbers still show that in spite of that, and it's getting harder, but we are continuing to serve more customers and provide more services. So when you're asked about the National Emergency Grant and the DW, yes, we had it for 23 years and we still need it, and it's time to reinvest in that. So I think that's my last slide. Yes, so any questions for workforce?
Is the reason that you're so skinny because you've taken a proportional cut to the amount of staffing?
No sacrifices have to be made. That's right. Thank you all.
Thank you, Lucas. And certainly, last but not least, generated with the executive director.
I think the reason that most people are packing the seats today is because we're going to talk about 911. This seems to be a biennial presentation that we give, and I sometimes feel like Chicken Little because I've come to you a couple of times and said, it's time to do it, and then the legislature pulls a rabbit out of the hat and puts $2 million in the fund, and it's better for us to stay. I think I can say with a pretty good degree of certainty that it's time for us to do this. I want to go over the kind of an overview and then kind of a why this time we feel like it's a little bit different. So first of all, I think you got to start with the beginning. So those of you who know this by heart, I appreciate your indulgence. Basically, 911 funding, municipalities are in one of two very broad categories. They're either in a 911 district or they're in a state-run program. Districts have specific boundaries that are usually set by statute or controlled by boards that set standards of service, budgets, and service fees. And then the Commission on Emergency State Communications governs the remaining areas, which are usually regions, and they set the standard of service, your annual budgets, and they establish the appropriate service fee. So what is the source of the funding? It's funded basically through two sources: service fees and surcharge. Every time you install a line service on one of these devices at home or on your pager, if you still have one of those things, or if you have anything that goes over the airwaves or is on a phone line, you pay 50 cents per month per line fee. It's collected by the phone company and it is remitted to the state. Surcharge or supplemental fees that you also pay, that you may not know you pay. It's one of those things that's hidden in your bill. And that is a supplemental amount of money that the state collects to try and bring those regions and districts that don't generate enough revenue to cover their costs. They bring them supplemental or a surcharge amount of money. So regions are usually funded by a service fee alone unless there's insufficient fees to cover their costs. And then the state awards those shortfall regions surcharge fees. Just for the record, we are wholly funded through service fees. We are the largest region in the state of Texas that is not a district at this time. And as such, our service fees are more than adequate to cover our costs. So, how is our budget established? Well, if you're in the CSEC system like we are, every biennium, CSEC requests us to provide an estimated budget of providing 911 service and planned equipment replacements on their schedule. And then those budgets are compared against the appropriated revenues. And then they take CSEC's 10% off the top. And then a proportional amount of service fee is allocated to each region. We estimate that on a typical year, if there is no supplemental funding, see somewhere between 38 to 45 cents out of the 50. It's been as low as 32 cents, and it's been as high as about 45 cents. We are allocated to the region, and in years where there's an offset and there's not enough money, CSEC adjusts everybody's budget proportionally. And I'll show you that in our historical data in a minute. If you're a district, it works completely differently. Staff prepares a budget just like they do if they're in the CSEC system, but then the staff makes a recommendation to the local board of managers, which in this case would be you all initially as the SICCOG board. And if there's an excess of revenues over the projected expenditures, there are certain options. Number one, they can supplement the district reserve because you don't have the power of the state reserve anymore. You can approve other expenditure categories that you would normally spend money on if CSEC doesn't allow you to. An example of that, and I don't want you all to rush to the monetary trough here when I say this, is radios are an allowable expense, but they are specifically excluded if you're in the state system. If you're a district and you have sufficient reserves and you have sufficient revenues to cover your expenses, you can, as a district, fund radio improvements. Or you can choose to lower the service fee. Right now it's 50 cents. We can lower it to whatever it makes to be a balanced budget if we have sufficient revenues and sufficient reserves. But the board of managers or the SICCOG board in this initial example would consider approval or modification of the budget. So why would you become a district? Number one, it cuts out the state commission and it eliminates the state's regulatory rules. The state regulatory rules exist for a reason, and I don't want to throw them all under the bus, but they're often subject to wide degrees of interpretation depending upon who your state analyst is. And we spend a great deal of time arguing with the state over whether something's allowable or not allowable. And we found many times that things that were allowable last year are submitted the same way that they were last year, and the different analyst decides that this year it's not allowable. And we spend an inordinate amount of staff time having those intellectual conversations, shall we say. So local control is a big issue, and greater control over funding. If you're a district, the funds flow directly from the phone company to the comptroller's office, and directly from the comptroller's office back to the COG. There is no set aside, you're not subject to appropriations, so you have a more predictable funding cycle. As long as we don't have big downturns in population, we have a pretty good idea what our funding would be year to year. So here are historic funding levels. The takeaways from this chart are we're funding every dying in, and every dying in pretty much goes up. Notably, you can see that in FY 2012-13, we took a huge dip. Well, I don't remember a lot of people moving out of Central Texas in the biennium of 2012-2013, but I do remember the governor of the state of Texas asking all state agencies to take a 10% across the board cut. And even though we were service fee funded, not tax fee funded, CSEC participated in that 10% cut because they are gubernatorially appointed. So even though there were sufficient revenues, we took an across the board cut. And that was a real hard binding to provide 911 services. Then you can see it jumped up again. We looked at becoming a district in 2014-15, and we projected our revenues would be a little bit shy of what they were the previous year, so we did not do that. And that will take you all the way out to 22-23, where you see the blue line, $6.4 million, but that purple line says 5.5. The state was projecting that they had overextended themselves in 911 fees to the tune of $21 million. And so everybody took a proportional cut. That's the nature of being in the state system. You don't control the budget, the state does. To the contrary, if you look at FY 24-25, our allocation is $7.1 million. However, on paper, they have awarded us $8.7 million. So why in the world would I tell you to get out of the state system when they're giving us an additional $1.6 million with SB8 and Rider 9 monies that the legislature appropriated to 911? Because the state has deemed that because we have gotten ahead of the curve and are one of the first regions in the state to be next generation 911 compliant, that we can't spend that $1.6 million. Because we've already bought everything that $1.6 million could have been used for. So once again, had we been a district, that money was allocated directly from the legislature to the district, and they could use it for whatever purpose the district deemed was appropriate. But because we're in the state system, we're subject to interpretation of the state, and they're telling us, good news, we're giving you 8.7 on paper, but you're only allowed to spend 7.1 because you don't have any allowable expenses that fall within the category of next generation, because we've already deployed and you're all already operating in a next gen environment. So in effect, we're getting penalized for being ahead of the curve. And that's that problem we have. So why now? As the graph shows, in shortfall years, we're generated, we normally are appropriated lower amounts than we generate. We've historically stayed in the state system to benefit from surplus years. This year, 2 programs were appropriated to provide surplus revenues, and was determined that we're not able to utilize the surplus. So why now continue? I went and spoke with the new executive director of CSEC and said, why would we stay? Why would I recommend to the board of the COG to stay when we can't spend what you're giving us? And he said, well, how are you about to leave too? But I have a favor to ask. Would you not leave until after the legislative session? And I said, well, Andrew, I think you're a great guy, but why do I want to do you a favor when you're telling me I can't spend $1.6 million? And he said, well, the state legislature has, for the first time ever, appropriated general revenue funds to the Commission on State Emergency Communications. And if you'll wait until after the legislative session, I would be glad to allocate $500,000 of those revenues to you to assist in your transition. So The offer's on the table that if we wait until next August, September, that the state will basically take the 1.6 we can't use and write us a check for $500,000 to ease our transition into the good night of becoming a district. I'm not one to walk away from money, and it doesn't really cost us anything. So my recommendation is going to be to you that if you decide to support the staff recommendation next month for us to formally do this, it's not an action item today, that our target date be when I can get the $500,000 or more out of the state agency. And that will be at the end of next summer. The reason that he does not want us to leave during the legislative session is he has already submitted to the Legislative Budget Board his budget request for next year. And if we pull out at the same time that the East Central Texas Council of Governments is talking about pulling out, it's going to mess up their appropriations process. And he does not want to have to explain that. Now, I'm speaking for him very plainly with you because of the relationship we have. I'm sure that he would have a very flowery way of telling you that, but that's the only reason that I can really get out of him that he would like us to wait. And so I have had preliminary discussions with the director from the East Central Texas Council of Governments, David Cleveland, and he is recommending to his board, similarly that I am recommending to your board, that we stay at the party long enough to get through the legislative session and then take the offer of the state to basically buy us out and get us out of the state system. So what does it take to become a district? The last time we did this, we went out and asked for resolution support from all 32 cities in the COG and all 7 counties. Since then, rules changes have occurred that state that we don't have to do that again. We have to get a resolution of support from every county and every city that operates a PSAP. So that is the current list. Judge Blackburn, the reason you are highlighted in red is because on the date of passage of the very last resolution, the very minute that the gavel drops, all in favor aye, you are a district that moment. And we want to control when that moment is. And so if we just ask you and provide you resolutions and ask you to go, get those passed by your commissioners, courts, and city councils, we won't know when we're a district because we won't know exactly when the last one drops. And there's a lot of backroom work we have to do with comptroller's office to make sure that they know who to send a check to the next month. And we want to get all of that done before the last resolution drops. So our strategy is to request that Bell County, since they're just down the road from us, and they meet on a fairly regular schedule of every Monday, be the last municipality to consider the resolution. In the meantime, if we could get the rest of you, assuming that you decide to go forward with this recommendation, we would like to get the rest of those resolutions already done. And then we would hold them in our file. And when the day comes, when we're ready to make that recommendation to you, we have the money from the state and all of the dominoes are lined up, then I would, empowered by you, contact Judge Blackburn and say, can we get on your agenda next week? And then we would know that that moment, should it pass the Bell County Commissioner's Court, we would be a district at that moment. Then we go file with county clerks in each of your counties, just as a formality. But on that moment, CSEC stops paying the bills. CSEC is very clear about that. If the meeting convenes at 9 o'clock and at 9:12 or this first agenda item, at 9:13, they are going to turn off the money. It's funny, it takes them 6 months to pay them what they owe us, but they have no problem down to the minute determining when they're going to turn off the money. So our staff recommendation is that the SICOG Executive Committee next month is an agenda item. Authorize the SICOG Executive Director to begin preparing the required documentation to form an entity that would be known as the Central Texas Emergency Communications District. If approved, we would then distribute and ensure passage of resolutions of support from all required municipalities. And our staff would be present at any one of your municipalities that wanted us there during the meeting, plus any other municipality that a resolution is not required of, but they might have questions. We certainly want to be aware of that. CSEC has determined that once all resolutions are passed, the district is formed, and again, it is requested that Bell County refrain from passing their resolution until all other entities have done so. If approved, we would like to begin working on documents immediately and begin sending sample resolutions out for your preparation so we can get on your calendars. Again, we'd be glad to meet with you. We are meeting with other districts and CSEC staff to establish the best target date for that last resolution to drop. Current estimates are that it will occur sometime during the end of the calendar year 2025. And within 30 to 60 days of cutover, funds will flow directly from the State Comptroller's Office to SITCOG. And then with that passage of the resolution, you will be naming the SITCOG Executive Committee as the initial governing board of managers. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions about this. I think what's important for the public to know is that there are no new fees. It's the same 50 cents they're paying. This board would not have the authority to exceed 50 cents, nor would this board have the ability to bond or borrow money. So there's zero fiscal impact. The only way that this can impact the public or public safety entities in Central Texas is by providing a more stable financial flow, number one. And number two, in the future, once we have got our house in order and you all are satisfied that we have sufficient reserves to run that district, then we have the opportunity to be able to provide other enhancements to public safety communications in the region. Yes, sir.
Can you go back to your graph?
Yes. I say I can. We'll see.
Two questions. Currently, we're potentially eligible for not just what I'll call the fee revenue, but also the surcharge revenue. Have we ever received surcharge revenue? And the second question is, what's the graph going to look like in 26 when we're just getting fees? I mean, are we going to get the same or more money?
We're going to get, our projections are that we will get slightly more than the 7.1 that you're seeing as the base number in 24, because that is service fee. Our projections are somewhere between 7.2 and 7.3, because basically we wouldn't be paying the state's overhead or the state shortfall. So that's the answer to part of your question. The other part is, in the history that I'm aware of our 911 system, we have never been a surcharge recipient. What is interesting though is that if you are a district, you are eligible to be a surcharge recipient, although no one can find any record of it happening. So if something were to happen, and I can't even think of a circumstance, if something were to happen and we were to have a shortfall, we could petition the state for surcharge revenues. We just can't find a record that that's ever happened. And with the growing region, we don't anticipate that we would ever see a downturn in population such that our services would dip and make it more difficult financially.
So theoretically, population growth and not getting the 10% haircut, we should always see.
We should always see growth.
Growth.
And that's assuming that everybody continues to carry at least one of these. There was a dip for a while because people stopped using their landlines at home. They turned them off. And that was a source of 50 cents. But then people started carrying 2 and 3 cell phones or buying a SIM card for their tablet or their laptop or an air card, and all of those generate service fee. So I think as technology continues to proliferate, we're going to see more revenue because people are going to have multiple phones.
Is the 50 cent fee, what's it called, fee?
Service fee.
Service fee. 50 cent service fee set by legislature.
The service fee is set by statute, and if you are a district,
So that's by the legislature.
it was set by the legislature, unless you're a district, and then you have the power to set your service fee. Districts that were formed under different legislation than we would be formed under have the ability to set service fee as high as they want to. And there are some counties where it's as high as $1.18 a line. or some districts, I shouldn't say counties, I'm crossing my terminology here. But we would be formed under what was House Bill 737, which was shepherded through the legislature by Representative Aycock at that time. And that legislation limits this created district to 50 cents. So we can never exceed 50 cents unless we get another piece of legislation passed that would say the Central Texas Emergency Communications District can go up to X. So, yes, sir.
You say we get, with the deal, we get $500,000. You know, we were slated with like 1.6. What's the guarantee that we'd actually, they'd come through and give us the $500,000 if they didn't give us the 1.6? And the second part of that is, what can that $500,000 be used for with the right of reserves?
Those are good questions. First of all, we're learning a little bit about this game as we go with this new executive director. We would propose, once we knew that this was the direction you wanted us to take, to approach the commission with a transition plan. And as one of the conditions in the transition plan, we would have the executive director of CSEC make a formal recommendation to the board that he transfer money to us. And so we would have him on record that that is a part of our transition. I'm not saying that that's going to be the last shot in our arsenal. I'm not done fighting with them over the 1.6 that they say we can't use. And we have a few ideas as to how we might be able to get a little bit of both. But the process seems to be that Andrew wants us to go through is that if he makes this agreement with us, then we would have the commission bless our transition plan before our resolutions are passed. And then the commission would be on record as accepting or denying the staff's recommendation to pay us whatever number we agree to. And to be clear on 1.6 that they're saying we can't spend, they've allocated it to us, but they're also, the gatekeeper is deciding yes or no. And so far, everything that we've thrown to them and said, okay, we'll spend it on this. I know that's not allowed. Okay, we'll spend it on this. No, you've already bought that and it's not time for its replacement. The state puts you on a equipment replacement schedule that's between 5 and 7 years. And if they don't think it's time for you to replace equipment, you don't replace equipment, even if your equipment's broken, because you have to petition them to be out of cycle. So they just say that we're out of cycle and they're not going to allow us to spend the 1.6. And I think to salve that loom, the executive director is saying, I have some GR that I need to spend, and if you'll help me, I think I can help you. Yes.
We have a question online. Mr. B. Hunt, do the PSAPs have to be unanimous? And what if any one entity fails to pass the resolution?
If any one entity fails to pass a resolution, the district is not formed.
But it has to be unanimous.
It has to be unanimous. Yes.
So just piggybacking off Judge Blackburn, on the fees, the service fees, it maybe putting the carpet to the horse, we need to lobby our reps to change that bill to allow us to rate. Would that be something that we would need to do if we decide to transition?
I need to be very careful. The COG is not allowed by state statute to lobby.
I mean, okay.
So I can't recommend that we would lobby anyone for anything, but I can recommend that if this board were to decide that in the future an adjustment to that fee was appropriate, we certainly could educate our legislative delegation on what the impacts would be if it remained the same or if it were changed. I'm confident that we have sufficient revenues without requesting that at this time. And from my seat, I work for you all, you tell me what you want me to do. But from my seat, taking this one bite at a time keeps it clean and doesn't make us draw fire from people who think that the sole reason we want to form a district is so we can raise the fee. I think there are sufficient, I'm confident that staff has assured me, and my analysis indicates that without any supplemental money from the state, if we just rely on our generated service fee for this region, we will have more money than we have ever had, and it'll be sufficient to run the district.
You answered my second question.
Yes,
Jim, I definitely want someone from your staff in our commissioners court meeting to explain this overall, because there'll be that one commissioner asking a lot of questions. So,
yes,
just let us know when,
we will be there. Just tell us when it matches your agenda, and both the 911 staff and myself will be in attendance.
you'll be sending us email or notices when you're ready, right?
We can have this conversation whenever it is appropriate for you all, unless I get a feeling from this board that between now and September's meeting, you want me to stop this process. Staff's going to continue developing the work to move forward, but you all will take formal action to either approve or disapprove that direction at the September meeting. But I'm totally fine having conversations with everybody who needs to have conversations between now and then. I think information getting out in front of this is a smart way to go. I couldn't answer that, Judge. Does anybody on staff happen to know?
A follow up on that is how many?
I can get you that information, Judge, for the next meeting. I can tell you that.
I agree with your comments. I mean, question about, I don't see a need for, what I wanted to know was just who sets that cap, which is the legislature. And with our growth, we shouldn't need to adjust that probably for the foreseeable future, but just so everybody knows, when we do need to adjust it, or if that occurs, that means going to the legislature.
Yes.
And it'd be nice to know how many others are in the same boat we're in, because you want to coordinate that effort at some point. Not now, but at some point.
Yes.
Just kind of on that same budgetary note, you've said that the district revenue will be approximately $7.2 to $7.3 million a year. What's the expenses? And ultimately, where I'm going with that is how much revenue, how much surplus are we anticipating to generate every year?
I have to annualize that for you because the cycle is not a straight line. Because we have equipment replacement that occurs every 5 to 7 years. So there's always, there's kind of a buildup and then a drop and then a buildup and then a drop. But if you annualize that, we have, the term for the state when you have an excess of revenues over expenditures is not profit. It's called use of revenue in the terms of the district. And the statute requires us, when we have that to occur, to declare that use of revenue to our largest county. And so Bell County has been the recipient from time to time of everywhere from a $50,000 check to almost $1 million check. And so if you annualize that out, it's somewhere between $500,000 and $600,000 excess revenue annualized per year in a biennium.
We could start collecting that.
And we would start collecting that
as a rainy day fund.
as a rainy day fund until we reach the point where if the comptroller pickups and doesn't send us money 1 month, we can continue to pay the bills. And we're going to front load this as best we can because the state allows us to prepay for services for up to a certain number of months. So I've instructed staff to prepare as we would exit to pay out our expenses the maximum number of months that we're allowed, so that while the legislature's figuring out, while the comptroller's office is figuring out that they don't put the money in CSEC's account anymore, they put the money in SICOG's account, which, talking to people who've done this before, can go very smoothly or it can take 60 days, that we have sufficient service paid for so that we don't run into a problem. And then we would recommend you as a board of director, board of managers, that once we reach a certain reserve point, any excess of revenue would either be earmarked for other purposes that you all would sign off on, or we would lower the service, we would recommend lowering the service fee. Jesse, did you have a question over there before I turn this way?
27 to 30 districts in the state.
Okay. We'll get you those data. Yes, sir.
The state takes 10% for overhead to manage and provide the services they do. Can we provide the same or greater level of management for that same cost? Forecasting.
We already manage locally the program. We already have an administrative budget that's built into this, and there would be no change in that. There might be one full-time equivalent that we would have to add for a short period of time to transition us from the comptrollers. That would be someone more on the fiscal side, because we'll be chasing a lot of phone companies to make sure they're paying us instead of the state. Every district, every cog that has made this transition, and so far there have been 3, Austin, Dallas, and Houston, that have jumped. I'm sorry, 4, Lower Rio Grande also jumped. In my meetings with each one of them, they have said, had they had to do it over again, they would put a short-term financial person on to chase those revenues during the first year. But once the system is in place and the comptroller knows that we are the proper recipient, we would right size and be right back where we are administratively. So I think I'm answering your question to say that 10% can go into program. We don't need it for admin. We're fine on the admin side.
My next question.
Yes.
Earlier in the year, we went back and forth about how to allocate the radio systems. We won't have to do that under this. I think
I want to be completely transparent. The Board of Managers is the Board of Managers, and we as staff work for the Board of Managers. We're not recommending any changes to the 911 system at this time.
no, I mean, that was based off the money you were getting from.
Right.
We won't have to deal with that anymore because
We have sufficient revenues to do the PSAPs that we have, plus the Fort Cavazos PSAP that we support.
But we still have to allocate money.
You still would have to allocate money annually based upon, we would envision following the state's planning process, because it's a good planning process, at least for the short term, and come to you with a layout over a 2-year budget year that says, these are the PSAPs that currently exist. We recommend continuing to support those PSAPs. Here's where new investments need to be made. Here's where additional seats need to be had in growing areas. No one is declining such that, I mean, you can't go below 2 seats in any one municipality because you have to have primary and backup. But yes, in a very real sense, this Board of Managers would be adopting that budget, and as such, they would be allocating resources within the region.
Thanks.
Do you know of any, Jim, do you know of any other district that is in the situation that we are in throughout the state?
As far as not being able to spend their money, the East Texas Council of Governments is the closest one that is getting ready to face this, but they're also in a cycle where they were not next generation capable, so they're buying all new next generation equipment. Their problem is, because they're much more rural than we are, they want to go to a cloud-based system, which is a whole different technology that is not really accepted by 911 right now. So they're having a different battle, but it's a similar fiscal battle.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I know it sounds like there's not going to be a lot of changes in the transition. It's going to be a smooth transition, but as far as the transition funding, the $500,000, what would be some of the expenses that we would incur in that transition, since we can't buy any equipment or anything like that?
Well, that money would come to us on the day of transition, which means that we could spend it on whatever bills we had that had to be paid. On a monthly basis, we have monthly recurring costs, data lines. We have a database provider that provides the Annie and Allie, the number and the address that pop up on the screens. We have equipment maintenance costs for maintenance contracts. Again, staff will forward pay that as much as allowed by the law, but that $500,000 would, in my opinion, be crucial. That if the comptroller hiccups and we're 60 days, I can pay wireline charges without having to ask Mr. Urban behind you to go into the COGS reserve and then be reimbursed later. And so I think he is intending that $500,000 as please don't mess up my legislative
Yes.
budget allocation, number one, and number two, please don't fight me on the 1.6 too hard, because I don't want to have that battle with you. I'm putting that very plainly, but I think that's what he is intending it. I think it's an olive branch to say, well, let me back up. He's going to put in his LAR request for 20 systems, and 2 are going to jump out. If we jump out and East Texas Cog jump out, he's going to get appropriation for 20. And if we wait until after the legislature appropriates that money, our jumping out is not going to change his allocation. So it's advantageous for him to have 20 systems worth of money and only 18 systems to support. And so $500,000 is not a lot to him in order to get that.
Well, and that's the good thing, you know, as long as they, like the mayor was saying, talking about not being able to use that money, making sure that that 500,000 is not stipulated for certain things, that is only transition related, you know, and so.
Yes, sir. It would be GR, the general revenue dollars, which has, the commission has no strings on, unless they were to place it in the action, but that's my job to make sure that doesn't happen.
I mean, you got leverage right now because he doesn't want you to.
Right. That's why that number can only go up from 500,000.
How much is he holding from East Texas?
Again, East Texas is a different animal, but they want to get out, and they have $2 million of equipment replacement money that they're in year 5, and they think they ought to be able to spend that money, but but CSEC staff is saying, no, we're going to make your equipment last till 7 years. So they're pushing them out to 26 possibly. So they're basically holding about $2 million hostage for East Texas.
That tells me that he's lowball.
Yeah.
I'm aware. But if you gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, have taught me anything, it's to under promise and over deliver. So I'm just telling you what his offer is. I'm not accepting that offer point blank.
So you have a counter in ready?
What was your question?
You have a counter in ready?
I have a conference call with our state association and East Texas, and we have a strategy that both of us are going to go back to him together and ask for more. And at the same time, I don't want to show my hand too much, but at the same time, we're also working on how much of that 1.6 can we find a workaround to get. Even though CSEC had said no, we're not done picking at the edges. So if we can get both, or even a portion of both, then it's a win-win. It's very complicated how that budget works. So I just say up front, his offer is $500,000. I don't have him in writing yet, but.
Would that affect the way here locally, your staff and everything does the accounting? Right now, you know, the state collects it, sends it down, but if we do that, is that gonna affect how whoever does that here locally, how they, you know, receive the revenue here and all, or does it still come from the state, come down?
The way that it flows, and I think of it like a faucet. All money that's collected by the state goes to the comptroller's office. That's the one who collects it. That's what their role is. And then they allocate. Right now, all that money goes into a big pot, and all the green 911 dollars that are in that pot, the comptroller turns the faucet over to CSEC and turns it on until all the green money goes into that bag. And then they say, okay, we're done. Now, they're going to take the green bag, and they're going to take the faucet, they're going to pour the green money into the CSEC bag, but they're going to stop when they see Central Texas dollars, and they're going to move over and turn the faucet onto our bank account and drop every dollar that was generated and submitted by phone companies in this region for this region to this region. So that the accounting standard for us remains the same. To use a city or a county analogy, I would think of it very much as an enterprise fund. Those dollars have a different color, use. They don't lose their identity when they come to the COG, but we're used to that. You know, we have over 140 grants that each one has its own silo, its own recommendations, its own regulations for how it's used and how it's audited, how it's treated, and what it's allowable for. So this one will be no different. The difference in our financial reporting would be, and in the way we would do business, is that every fourth Thursday, 2 meetings would occur. One would be the Central Texas Council of Governments Executive Committee, either immediately preceded or followed by the Central Texas Emergency Communications District meeting, and it would have its own financials. Although it's held by the COG, you would be able to see what revenues were submitted from the state, how much the expenditures were, and what the status of the reserves are. And so those dollars would never lose their identity. They would be protected, if you will, and audited under our same single law. Any other questions? I don't want to miss anybody. So to be clear, staff is available. We will come to your councils, your commissioners' courts, your Lions clubs, whoever you want us to, your public safety meetings. We want to talk to your sheriffs, your dispatchers. We want everybody to understand what this does and doesn't do. Because we don't see a downside, otherwise we wouldn't recommend it. And you can expect that there will be a more detailed layout along with the data that's been requested as far as number of districts and service fee levels, which I can get from the 911 Alliance in September.
Jim, I want to say it's well explained.
Thank you. You guys gave me 12 years to get ready for it. With that being, yes, sir.
Could you prepare some bullet point talking points and send it out to everybody so that when we have a conversation with the local folks, that we have a little cheat sheet that we can refer back to?
Absolutely.
Any other questions for Jim or comments? Okay, I think our next meeting is Thursday, September.
And we have a question.
You want to go back to Hubnik again if you want to swear in?
We did have another on the agenda item for Commissioner Hubnik.
Okay, if there's no objection, let's revisit item number 3 on the agenda, which is oath of office. We've got Commissioner Hughes here.
Commissioner, you missed my very detailed instructions, so when I ask you to please raise your right hand, I will pause after I say aye, please state your name, and at the end you may swear or affirm. Okay? I, Henry Hubnik, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the duties of my office and that of the Executive Committee of the Central Texas Council of Governments, and will to the best of my ability defend the individual integrity of local governments of this association. And I furthermore promise to promote the general cooperation between member governments of the region in the interests of the citizens of Central Texas, so help me God. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you.
Jim, you have that? Okay, that concludes the business of the executive committee. Appreciate everybody's attendance, and we are adjourned.
So.